Welcome back. We are here with It's Not Just a Tuesday podcast, the podcast where we talk about work and life and sharing the stories that connect all of us. I'm really excited to have a good friend and former client and current client and neighbor almost, Shelly Propson-Lennon with me. Shelly has a very cool story, and I wanted her to have the opportunity to talk with us a little bit about the work that she does at Paint a Miracle. But also, I think the work that happens at Paint a Miracle is such a great example of no Tuesday is just a Tuesday, and so I think it's really good for everyone to hear this story. So, Shelly, welcome. Thank you so much for chatting with me for a few minutes. Tell us a little bit more about Paint a Miracle and you and this amazing studio that came to be.
Well, first off, thank you for having me, Andrea. It's really fun to be involved in projects with you, and I'm excited about you launching this podcast. And I guess, yeah, to tell you a little bit about myself and Paint a Miracle for those of you listeners who are not familiar with Paint a Miracle. We are an art studio for adults and children living with disabilities. And Paint a Miracle started 22 years ago. When I was 15, my dad was hit by a drunk driver and he suffered a massive traumatic brain injury and lost most of his eyesight on top of it. And so prior to that point, he had been a really successful dentist in the community, and everybody in Rochester who lived around here at the time, when you talk about it, they all say, "Oh yeah, I remember that accident. I remember that day." Because I think for so many people, it was a reminder that nobody escapes tragedy in
Yeah.
this world. And so my dad spent, it was a year before he came home from the hospital. He had 4 months in a coma. And then by the time he finished his rehab, he was left with all of this time and nothing to do. And my mom had tried hobby after hobby. And my dad had these days that just stretched on end, and he fell into a pretty serious depression because, I mean, he was never going to be able to go back to work.
Right.
And life was a struggle. So one day, one of his aides took him to an art studio in Lake Orion, and the owner of the studio, Helen Kniff, came out to the car and coaxed my dad
I
in,
love
and he wouldn't
that.
get out of the car. And she said, "Dale, why don't you just come in, check out the studio?" And he said, "I can't paint, I can't see." And she said, "Dale, you don't need your eyes to paint. The image goes from your brain to your heart to your hand." And so we still have that first painting that he did. It was a series of balloons. And my mom started noticing that my dad was going with his aide weekly to Helen's studio, and he would come home whistling, and he would come home in a good mood, and he started to have his ability to concentrate improved, and his ability to scan even improved because he had this special device that helped him read.
Okay.
So much changed in his life. And I'll never forget that first Christmas. He came home from Helen's studio and he had these 4 packages wrapped for my mom. And we opened them up and he had painted her the 4 seasons. And my 3 brothers and I, we just sat there with my mom and we all cried because, I mean, really what Helen did was give my dad a reason to get up in the morning.
Right.
So he started painting. Gosh, he painted for years with Helen. And then coincidentally, the day my son Alex was born, Helen passed away. And one of the last things she said to my mom was, "Annie, Dale is an artist. He needs to paint." And so what my mom found is that as much as she tried to give my dad an inspired place to create at home, it just didn't happen. And my dad, maybe a couple years prior to Helen's passing, said to my mom, "Annie, I want to start an art studio for people like me."
Wow.
And so it sat there as an idea. And I want to say it was right after Helen passed away that my brothers and I and my mom, we looked at each other and we thought, we need to make this happen. because by that point we had researched and there really wasn't anything in the Detroit area that did what we wanted to do. I mean, you had Far Conservatory, but they had a real specific focus, and what we were looking for was, basically a place for people to come and to create, and a place to become part of a community of artists and people from all walks of life that might not be able to say go to Paint Creek because maybe they need special accommodations to help them in the studio. I mean, if you've got a traumatic brain injury, maybe you need someone to, sit with you and help you break down directions or remember what you wanted to do next. Or
Right.
if you have eyesight limitations, maybe somebody helps you, remind you that you have a whole left side of the page that needs to be filled. But in any event, that was the inspiration for starting Paint a Miracle. And so we started at the Rochester Community House with 4 artists, and my
So
dad was one of
incredible.
them. It felt like we kept joking that we felt like Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams
You
because
were. You built it. People
yeah,
came.
but we just had this idea and nothing really to show for it other than an idea. So we've now grown to serve, gosh, we serve over probably 300 people over the course of the year. And we do outreach to different groups and organizations. We run the summer art program for Rara's Scamp. We partner with the Rochester Community Schools, with New Horizons Rehabilitation, and then we have our weekly classes here where I want to say probably over 70 artists come on a weekly basis to create art at Paint a Miracle, and we exhibit and sell their work. Our biggest event of the year last year sold over $15,000 of our artists' work, and then they get a commission back.
Right. And that's what I think is so, I mean, I think that the art studio is like where the magic happens because people think of, we have so many stigmas around people with disabilities, and we don't think of that as always fine art and high-end art. But these are really true artists who have a space to craft their skill, and just have a space to be artists and connect with other artists, which I think is so unique to you guys. I know there are other people who do similar spaces now, which I love, and I know you've talked to some across the country now, who've been able to do that. But I think, you know, knowing that you're right, you built it, and people said, yeah, we need that space, and being able to know that you're helping people get a paycheck that may not otherwise, or make a friend, um, and be considered an artist and sell that work. I heard someone say, I think you're an artist if you sell a piece. Before that, it's like a hobby or something. I think one of your artists may have said that to me.
Oh,
So the
funny.
fact that they are able to sell means that they have transitioned into this true artist in their minds, and I think that's really cool. Um, I definitely have to say, as long as I've known you, I think that I've known you maybe 10 or so years, and I've heard you tell the story about your dad many times, and it hits me every time. The reason that I'm doing this thing where I want to talk to people and hear about their Tuesdays, and it's Tuesday now, is because as many times as I've seen you give interviews or hear you tell the story of Paint a Miracle, I've never heard you tell the story of your dad painting the Christmas present for your mom.
Uh, that's right.
And I
Yes.
just like, there are always more stories to be told, and I love the opportunity to give you a place to share that with one more person, even if no one listens to this. So thanks for telling me your story one more time, uh, because that is such a perfect example of, you do this work every day, and it's beautiful and amazing, and it came from a place that's beautiful and amazing, but there's still things that people don't know. And so I was listening to you talk, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've never heard this part before. This is so cool." So, You talked a little bit about who the studio is open to, and what the studio actually does in the studio space. You also have a ton of community partnerships, obviously. But how do artists connect with you, and how do they find a space to work with you, and how do they know they're artists?
That's a good question. Still to this day, everything is through word of mouth with us for the most part. I mean, you are honestly the first person that we've worked with in terms of helping us, from a marketing sort of perspective to help get our name out there. And we really do operate through word of mouth. Anytime somebody is interested in coming to take a class, it's very personalized. I mean, we set up a meeting with the potential artist and their family, and we decide what's going to be the best fit for them. What class is the best match? Do they need a place where they can really be social? Do they need an environment that's a little more quiet? I mean, how do we best meet their needs and their goals? And that's one of the things that I love about this place is our education director, Lynn Riordan, and all of our instructors and our volunteers. It really is about the individual artist. And the minute somebody comes into one of our classes and sits down and picks up a paintbrush or a pencil, they're an artist. I mean,
I
those
love that.
those are the yeah, those are the words that we use because I feel like it gives a person a sense of dignity and a sense of belonging the minute that they come take a class at Paint a Miracle.
Yeah. Um, One of the other things I think is really interesting is that, you know, we I have ideas about what disability means. I have met artists who I wouldn't know were disabled. I have met artists with physical disabilities. I've met artists with developmental disabilities. I've met folks who have mental disabilities, emotional, and so I think that's another really cool way that you're like leveling the playing field, even in the disability world, because someone with bipolar may think differently than someone with autism or cerebral palsy or all of these things we lump into the word disability. And so there's so much space for people to learn from each other still, and be able to, I think you and I said this earlier today, everyone's an artist, right? It doesn't that the other parts of their identity don't actually matter, because you're gonna find a way to make that work for them.
Well, right. And I think part of it is like when you talk about the other parts of your identity that don't really matter. I mean, we have different perspectives and we have different voices that we bring to things because of what we go through, right?
Yeah,
Because of, what might be a perceived disability also gives us a unique perspective. And I
yeah,
think that's one of the things that I've really learned over the last 20 years is how those things in our life, be it, a physical disability, a cognitive disability, a mental disability, it also provides, it gives us strength, right?
yeah,
It gives us meaning. And I think it helps us connect with people better. I mean, I just think there's some incredible beauty and significance in so many of the pieces of art that come out of this place, and I just love it. I mean, I didn't when we started Paint a Miracle, that wasn't one of my goals, but certainly now that we are getting our art into the community and sharing it with,
yeah,
with the community, I feel like it's such an important part of what we do because you really get to see just how incredible our artists are. And I think so many times, I don't know, people who are sick, people who have disabilities, people with chronic conditions, whatever it is, like they don't really have the voices all the time because maybe they don't have the energy. Maybe they can't even get out of the house.
right.
Maybe they and I think that it's important to hear those voices.
Yeah. You do that, and hopefully, you're learning more about how to be able to do that and just what's so unique. I will say we were just on a call before this, you and I, and the perfect example of it's not just a Tuesday. We had a Shelly is a client of mine. We were having a check-in meeting and she said, "Do you hear happy birthday in the other room?" It's one of our artists' birthdays. She was walking in and the whole place erupted in happy birthday for her. And I said, "Take your phone, get up right now, go take a picture of that. We need to share that story about what a community your space is." And so, those are the perfect Tuesdays that I think we forget that yes, we want to tell the big stories, but also those little moments are the moments that connect people with you. And those are the moments that should be sharing. So later when you look at Pain of Miracle's social media pages, you will see happy birthday to Abby and a shout out to that artist because we made sure that it wasn't just a Tuesday and we shared that. So now it's your turn. One of the things that I'm going to be doing, and I've done with other folks that we've interviewed, is I'm going to let it be your turn to share your Tuesday, because I'm always asking you, well, what's going on? What else is happening? What's happening next week? Is anyone coming in? Are you doing anything? Who's there? I think part of the reason I got into journalism and then PR and social media is because I'm just really nosy and I want to know what everyone's doing all the time. So, but what I've discovered is those Tuesdays are usually really something. And we're all just have our heads down getting through the day. And we don't think of it that way. So I asked you before you got on to think about what was on your calendar last Tuesday that you may have loved, that you would never have thought to share with somebody, but that is actually really important to you.
Okay, so I did. I looked back on my calendar. What did I do last Tuesday? And it was actually really meaningful. Wasn't certainly wasn't anything that I would typically share. But I had a really close friend of mine who is the mother of one of our Pain and Miracle artists. Her daughter has a rare disorder. It's called Coffin-Lowry syndrome. There's probably maybe, I don't know, it's we're talking hundreds of people, not even thousands of it. It's so under researched, right? And so she has been an advocate for her daughter for years and years and years, and very involved with Pain and Miracle. And so I've gotten to I would call her a close friend of mine at this point. And she had a friend who she really wanted to connect us up together. So we went out. She took us to lunch because her friend's son and my daughter both have a rare chronic condition called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And it's a tough one because really it's that your body has difficulty regulating blood pressure. So in my daughter's case, she tends to have really low blood pressure sometimes, but then when she stands, all the blood goes to her feet and she goes into tachycardia. So it, you can pass out with it, you get really dizzy. So it's a journey, right? And it's a journey which makes our kids stronger. But as a parent, it's really hard to watch your kid struggle. And so, my friend Mo kind of knew that in connecting the two of us up, that sometimes there's just knowing that you're not alone. I mean, we all know that life is hard, right? You always have that. You see it on social media all the time, like be kind because you don't know the battle that
Right.
the other person's facing. And it is so true
Yep.
because we are all dealing with different things. And I think that sometimes sharing those burdens, I mean, it helps us be better people. It helps us be better parents, and it helps us, I think, have more empathy for just people in general.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That was not what I was expecting.
Yeah,
That was a
I was
great
looking for
Tuesday.
something. I was looking for
No, I'm so glad that thank you. Thank you for feeling comfortable to share that with, the 7 people that might listen to this podcast. Um, but also, like, that is exactly why I ask people what was on their calendar, because what a glimpse into your life and the reason that you are more empathetic with every parent who walks in your doors, but also what an incredible example of the relationships that you've built in this nonprofit that you are, just happen to have founded and be the executive director of. And now these are your best friends who are there to support you as you support their children. And I've had the privilege of meeting Mo and her daughter, and just how amazing they are, and her daughter and Carly's work is beautiful. And what a perfect example of just full circle mission work. And I think that is why I think it's so important not to forget our Tuesdays, because I mean that's so impactful. And whether or not, I always tell people, maybe you'll decide to share that and maybe you won't, right? Those moments are really, that's so telling of your story. That's your story, that you are, be kind. We don't know. You don't know, we don't know what you've gone through as a parent, and we may have some perceived notion of, or we may think we know why you founded Paint a Miracle because of your dad, but we don't know the story of your daughter. And we don't know the impacts of your relationships with those parents that are there, with their adult children now who are attending, and so and artists there. So I think, what a cool, that was very cool, better than I could have ever imagined a Tuesday would have been. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting because since last Tuesday, I have now come across two more people whose adult children struggle with this, and
Oh my
really,
gosh.
it's been a lot of people have develop it after having a virus or something like that. So,
Okay.
post COVID, it seems like it's kind of
Okay.
hitting people too. But I guess I feel like
Right.
you never know who out there, you might be able to connect with, because sometimes I don't know, it's interesting in this world of mass communication, how much easier it is for us to
Yeah,
sometimes be there for one another. And, yes, we are over scheduled, and,
100%.
nobody has enough time, but there's, nothing that can replace that, human, one-on-one contact, and just, being able to just, I don't know, share struggles. And at the
Yeah,
same time, as a parent, recognize, I mean, you have a son. I mean, we realize just how resilient our
they
kids
are.
are,
Yeah,
and what they're capable of, and nobody wants to watch their child suffer. But when you see what comes out of suffering, the growth that comes out of suffering, somehow the beauty that comes out of suffering. I mean, Paint a Miracle is a perfect example of
oh
that.
my gosh, yeah.
And yeah, I think that if at the end of the day, if I've done anything like for this organization, I hope it's to drive that narrative
Mhm.
that, something good can always come out of something bad. Like there's meaning, and there's beauty that comes out of every struggle.
Yeah, that's that's beautiful. And I also, I think something that you said earlier about just the, we don't know who can benefit from it, right? Had you not been vulnerable to talk to Mo, and Mo not been vulnerable to say, I have a friend for you to meet, and then you meet some more people, right? And I think that's the piece of, I have this like balance all the time between social media being such a beast, but also it's what I do for a living.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
also I think it has the power to be good. And so it's making those conscious choices. And it's part of the reason that I do this work, is because I believe that we can connect the right things if we do it, if we are willing to share those stories. And if every once in a while someone will be vulnerable, how many people will hear that and say, oh wait, that's me too.
Mhm.
I needed to hear that today, or whatever that is, or oh, my daughter has that too. And I thought I was alone. I thought it was too rare that I could find a colleague.
Well, and I think too, it's interesting. I mean, just even working at Paint a Miracle and seeing some of the artists that come through the door and that are willing to make themselves vulnerable and share their stories, or even, hearing of, some of the struggles that some of the volunteers or that have, I mean, gosh, things that I had never heard of, conditions that you hear about it. I guess what I'm saying is like some of these things that you hear about, you feel like it's a death sentence, right? But then you see someone who's living their life and they're thriving in spite of
Mhm.
all of it, right?
Right.
And that is such an inspiration to the other people who come through the door here. And I've just watched so many of our families be able to be there for one another, or the new person comes in and then they're kind of loved on by
Yeah,
everybody else, and they, get to be part of the community. And it's just really, yeah, it's what
awesome.
it's like Brene Brown, the power of vulnerability, right?
It
I mean,
is. It is, it really is. Um, okay, so for anyone who wants to know more about how to get involved with Paint a Miracle and what they could do to support the work that you do here in this Metro Detroit area, um, how can people get involved? How can we help?
well, I think first of all, considering that it is March, the first thing that I would say to do is hop on our website, go to our upcoming events, and buy a ticket to our spring luncheon, because it's the perfect opportunity to just dip your toe into what happens at Paint a Miracle. And it gives you a great opportunity to view the art, to buy the art, to meet our artists, and then to see if it's something that you might want to get involved in, either, as a volunteer or as an instructor or financially investing in Paint a Miracle and our artists.
I love it. And if you're local, definitely you're gonna wanna come May 20th. At some point soon, I'm gonna talk Shelly into, having some online sales so that people can see and purchase this incredible art online, because I think everyone across the globe really should experience some of these artists' amazing work. We'll get there one day. That'll be a different story for us to tell. But thank you so much for taking some time. I know that you're busy and have a lot going on and have a studio full of artists in the other room. But thank you for taking some time to chat with me today and share your Tuesday with me. And I hope everyone just takes a glimpse and learns more about Paint a Miracle, or find out if there's work like this in your community. If there isn't, call Shelly and find out if she knows if somebody is doing something in your area like that, because it really is so amazing to see individuals of all abilities being able to thrive as artists and share their stories through art.
And I guess if I could say one more thing, Andrea, for anybody out there who's listening, who might be someone who might benefit from taking classes at Paint a Miracle, or might be interested in taking classes, or if you have a loved one who might be interested in taking classes, I just encourage you to come and make an appointment and visit with us. I mean, don't even be deterred by, I mean, sometimes it's overwhelming. Like the cost can be overwhelming, or just getting your foot in the door can be overwhelming, or art can be intimidating. And I just encourage you to just come. And we work with people all the time. That's why we do these fundraisers, because we have full and
Yes.
partial scholarships for our artists, and we want to be there to serve anyone who might benefit from our classes.
Thank you so very much. And it's not just a Tuesday. We'll see you all on a different Tuesday.
Thanks for having me.